Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Focus In. I would like to apologize for the long hiatus. My schedule for the past few weeks has been really jam packed with school and all, but I'm planning to go back on track with the new schedule, and I'm going to be releasing bi-weekly as originally planned. Today's topics are something like tips and tricks for new photographers and others who see photography as a peaked interest in the future. Over time, as I was a photographer, I picked up these tips and tricks from personal experience. So these aren't just things I grabbed from the internet. These are things I can personally speak of that grew to work on over time. However, do keep in mind that whatever may work for me may not necessarily work for you. So please keep that in mind. For beginners trying to get into photography, it's extremely important to learn three of the most important of the basics. And I would even call them the three pillars of photography. It's one of the first things I learned when I started my journey, and I feel like it's one of the most important things for new people to learn. One of them is ISO. What is ISO? It's pretty much essential to taking a good photo in a bright or dark place. It controls how much light your camera takes in, and your ISO can help make your pictures a lively night bright and poppy, while making your photos of a perfect afternoon feel like you are seeing it with your own eyes. ISO is one of the most crucial parts of taking photos since it can really make or break them with how easily you can make a photo at night be super visible to pitch black, so it's good to learn this sooner in your journey rather than later. Even with just beginning to take photos, managing your ISO well can help your photos immediately look better. And as you learn more about ISO and capture your own style with it, you can really make photos shine against everyone else's. A good starting point for using ISO would be 100, 400, 800, and 1600, with the lowest value 100 for very sunny settings and 1600 for nightlife photos. Starting off with these lower values can help you find a good middle ground for taking your photos and can also give you a little safe range for experimenting with different angles and ISOs to really make something beautiful. My next point is aperture. Aperture is one of the other three pillars of photography, with focusing on how much light your camera lets pass its sensor. It's just like how our pupils work. Open them wider, more light passes through. The smaller they are, the less light passes through. This also affects how dark or washed out photos can be, so make sure to take into consideration how much light is in your area. For mastering aperture, it really all just depends on how bright it is. Keeping a low aperture for a nice sunny day outside can lead to you having an amazing photo saved forever, becoming an amazing memory. Aperture plays such an important role in making your photos the best they can be, and is really worth investing your time if you are learning photography. Just learning the basics of focus and even take some test shots beforehand so you can let your basic photo turn into the best you've ever taken. Now, I can personally adjust attest to this because there are times where my aperture may be too low or it's too high, and I really do stress and recommend that whenever you're going to like a venue, if you're doing something, obviously if you're doing personal photography, you're gonna have ample amount of time to change your settings and adjust them accordingly. But if you're doing pictures for like an event, you want to make sure that when you go around to take pictures, that you take it beforehand. I've probably mentioned this before, but whenever somebody comes to you and asks you, hey, can you take this picture? You're not sitting there fumbling with your settings, and that's what you want to avoid. Aperture also affects the depth of field and focus of photos. The further you focus in the lens, the more blurred the background of the picture is, making for some beautiful shots of a small flower or a nice plate of food, while having a more open lens for a breathtaking shot of a large cityscape or ocean view. Next point, shutter speed, the final pillar of photography. It is just as important as the other pillars. Shutter speed is as just as it sounds. How fast the camera opens and closes to take a photo. It allows for you to get a slice of whatever's happening. This lets your camera absorb more light, getting more exposure to a dark space or absorb less light, capturing fast-moving objects in a bright scenery. Being proficient with your shutter speed is super important in taking a really good photo. Keeping it super fast would be perfect for getting a picture of an active, pretty highway, letting you take a snippet of activity without it coming out super blurred or incomprehensible to you and everyone else looking at it. Lowering your shutter speed lets your photo gain a lot more exposure and light, making it more perfect rendition of what you saw in the highest quality and most still in its most still form. Like you took what you saw and put it right in your camera. Now, usually I see most photographers, and I guess the best example is when you're capturing action or just sports. Some cameras may even have a sports mode or a sports setting on the dial whenever you're going from manual to other modes. So if you're shooting like a race or something, like a motor race, or you're shooting like sports, you kind of really want to crank the aperture up really high, because then you want to capture that fast motion. But you also have to remember that you have to compensate with other settings. So, for example, if your shutter speed is really high, you want to compensate with either ISO or shutter speed, because then the photo is going to come out too dark because it's literally too fast to take in light. But the slower your shutter speed, it's going to take in more light. So you have to adjust other settings to take in less light in your camera lens. So that's just a tip I recommend for everybody. The opposite can also be said. Having a super fast shutter speed when trying to capture something moving really fast with lots of blur is its own style and can emphasize how fast life moves and creates its own meaning with just a single photo. The same goes for a fast shutter speed for a dark area. It can play into more of a shock effect with the photo, as if it's flashing in your eyes and you have no time in what you saw. But remember everything about it, making it more special all in all. Auto white balance. White balance is very important for pictures since it gives color. Having a messy white balance can leave your colors coming out very different to what is actually supposed to be seen, leaving your photos very unnatural and messy. I personally, when I was first starting out, I never learned about white balance until I was doing, I forgot where. It was at my school, but it was some cultural festival or something like that. I don't think that's what we called it, but we were doing something and my white balance was off. And I remember one of the more experienced photographers told me, and he changed my white balance to auto, and all my pictures weren't coming out blue. They weren't coming out all these different colors. And I realized how clear it looks, and I used that for the whole night, and I wanted to come home and try it on my own camera because at the time I was using it on the school's camera. So I really highly emphasize just leaving on auto. I mean, yes, you can change the light, but it really is just easier just leaving on auto, because then it's not all the time where you know what type of lighting situation you're in and you want to be able to, like I said, be on your toes, especially if you're doing a gig. But if you're by yourself, then you don't need to sit there and like have to worry about rushing to get your settings right. Using white balance can easily amplify your photos, making the color look white and letting your colors pop. White balancing can mess with your colors by giving it more of a different temperature, more warm and orange, or more cool and blue, making them seem like they have some sort of tint or filter to them, indicating some mistake or error with your white balancing. Making your balance very neutral can help your photos give off a feeling of seeing it through your own eyes and enhancing the experience for viewers of your photos. Also, make sure you don't use too much color, because you could lead to you having an oversaturated photo, ruining and washing out all the colors and making it more of a blob of paint. Just like shutter speed, there's a lot of nuance to white balancing. Maybe you want to take a photo in a more moody tone, so you put it in the black and white to give it more of a monotone feel and make it way better. The same can also be said about color temperatures and oversaturation. Emphasizing the blue in your very vibrant blue scene can allow you to make it come off very cool and welcoming, while making your photo more warm around something hot can add way more to the feeling of heat towards the photo. Adding oversaturation to photos can make some photos going for a more chaotic photo go above and beyond, allowing it to be even more crazy than it originally was. I'm going to heavily and highly stress this point. Just take pictures. That is it. Just take pictures. There are times where you want to get better at something. You sit down, you learn all these skills, but sometimes it really is just sitting down and taking pictures. Just taking pictures is a great way to get started in photography. It lets you experiment by yourself and see what you like to do compared to following some sort of guideline and locking away your potential. When people ask, how do I get better at XYZ, they're usually looking for a guide of sorts to help them get better at something. Most of the time, you just have to do it, guidance or not. Photography is one of those things, and that just needs to be done for you to understand it. You could sit and read a textbook for days on end learning about golden ratios and the rule of thirds. It all means nothing if you can't apply it. Just going around and taking photos of things you find interesting can really help you get a feel for your camera and learn how to use it way more than any basic tutorial can teach you. Learning your natural way to use a camera can incredibly increase your skills as a photographer and make you amazing with just basics. Altogether, getting comfortable with your pillars and just taking photos can help you excel as a photographer beyond what anything can teach you. Getting into photography is super easy, but mastering it can be a bit of a struggle. Learning some basics can easily help you grow more and more, not only with your skills, but the camera you use. And that knowledge can bring you so far in any field. Just taking a bit to learn and apply what you learn can bring you so far with just a bit of practice. and adding more and more onto your skills slowly can make you a certified master of photography in no time at all. I wish everyone luck with their photography journeys so you can be beyond amazing. Thank you everyone for listening to this week's episode. Like I said, I have been super busy with school and I haven't had the time to sit down and even write a script, let alone research for a script. I am happy to say, and you too know who you are, I'm happy to say that they're on the team and they're helping me tremendously. I have a writer and an editor now, and it is going really well. I hope to get this podcast to a point where I can monetize and pay them, because the work they are doing should not be, it shouldn't go on for free. But I really do appreciate the support from both of them, and they both know who they are. I don't think I have to say any names, but if they want me to say their names, I'll definitely mention them in the next episode. I really want to appreciate everybody for the support on not just this episode, but the whole podcast overall. With the help of this team, like I said, I should be back on schedule, just doing bi-weekly. So I can give my input, I get the writer to do his thing, and I just go from there. I get the editor to look at it, and she gives her thoughts on it, and I make the necessary critiques, and we go on from there. So everything's better with a team rather than just doing it by yourself. But once again, everybody, thank you for tuning in this week. Until next time, focus in.